mothers and fathers, sons and daughters who've been killed are not numbers. They're not characters in a video game. Their deaths are not to be celebrated.
Here's an idea, Mr. President. Take the billions in American taxpayer dollars that goes to fund Israel's Iron Dome and the killing machine known as Operation Protective Edge and send it to Detroit so the people over there can turn on their damn water.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. We have a new affiliate in Barre, Vermont. So now The Struggle is shown on 24 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We begin with a video produced by Jewish Voice for Peace and the Institute for Middle East Understanding. It consists of pictures of celebrities holding up cards upon which is written the name of a Palestinian in Gaza or the West Bank who was killed by Israel's IDF.
For decades, Palestinians have endured statelessness, occupation, dispossession, and a lack of basic rights, while Israel has steadily taken their land and denied their freedom. Holding the people of Gaza under a 7-year siege has only brought more suffering, not peace. The mothers and fathers, sons and daughters who've been killed are not numbers. They're not characters in a video game. Their deaths are not to be celebrated. Each one has a name, an age, a story.
We'll next move to some powerful speakers at a rally we held in Hartford on the last day in July. But before that, I want to comment on some racist garbage that Netanyahu and the idiot newsman Bob Schieffer repeated. They both said that the Palestinians want lots of dead bodies to impress the world public. When I heard this, I wrote down these thoughts. The Zionist regime running Israel is leading the Jewish people to disaster. Their latest revolting lie is that Palestinians want lots of dead bodies, telegenically dead, to gain world sympathy for their cause. As if they didn't already have thousands of images of atrocities committed against them, none of which have melted the stone-hearted world leaders. I take a phrase from a popular Passover prayer, Dayenu. It means it would be sufficient. I write a new prayer, a lament called a new Dayenu. If images of suffering could help Palestinians, then the month-long death of Saba Abu Halima from white phosphorus burns in 2009, Dayenu. The 29 killed in one family in Gaza during Operation Cast Lead, Dayenu. The young teenager Yusuf Abu Shawamra, shot while trying to pick wild vegetables, Dayenu. The videotaped execution of 2 youths shot to death by snipers outside of Ofra prison, Dayenu. The mobs running through Israeli streets shouting death to the Arabs, Dayenu. The demolition of 28,000 Palestinian homes for lack of a permit, Dayenu. The lynching, burning to death of Muhammad Abu Khader, Dayenu. Dayenu. Now, an electrifying speech by attorney and longtime New Haven activist Michael Jefferson.
A great man once said, and I quote, "The ultimate measure of a man or woman is not where he or she stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he or she stands at times of challenge and controversy." The man was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and there is no question in my mind where he would stand today in these times of challenge and controversy. Words are inadequate to describe what we are witnessing in Gaza today. It is a cruel and ugly reminder that history does, in fact, repeat itself. As Lenny previously stated, as a student of history and as a man well-versed in the horrors of the Second World War, I find it incomprehensible that men and women whose family members felt the unmitigated barbarism of the Third Reich can today inflict such savagery on a defenseless people. Let us be clear. The terrorists are not in Gaza, they are in Tel Aviv, and their benefactors are in Washington, D.C. As an African American, a black man, I utterly refuse to make excuses for the first African American to occupy the White House. Barack Obama is wrong. He's wrong. What kind of man who has 2 young daughters of his own and can watch such naked brutality being visited upon the sons and daughters of the Palestinian people, and then with sheer audacity calmly state that the aggressor has a right to defend itself? Against what, Mr. President? A population that has been decimated, living in the world's largest open-air prison the size of Detroit. Here's an idea, Mr. President. Take the billions in American taxpayer dollars that goes to fund Israel's Iron Dome and the killing machine known as Operation Protective Edge and send it to Detroit so the people over there can turn on their damn water. Why are we funding Israel anyway? What do we get out of the deal besides the justified wrath of freedom-loving people all over the world? How does this relationship benefit American citizens? It is not in America's long-term strategic interest to support the state of Israel. We should cut them off immediately and support the aspirations of the Palestinian people with the full backing of the international community. I want to provide a word of admonition to those who have chosen to find a comfortable seat on the fence regarding this conflict, or who have taken refuge in the shade of ambiguity. Know this: history is replete with examples of oppressed people desperately and heroically fighting to free themselves from the iron grip of tyranny. Those struggles demanded the unequivocal support of righteous men and women. There was no middle ground in the fight against slavery in the United States. You were either down with the peculiar institution where black men, women, and children were considered property and treated as such, or you were down with their struggle for liberation. There was no middle ground in the fight against fascism in Europe during World War II. You were either down with Hitler and the monstrosity of the Third Reich, or you were against it. There was no middle ground in the fight for civil rights in this country. You were either down with Bull Connor and his fellow segregationists who were determined to maintain the racial status quo, or you were down with Dr. King and the movement for civil rights. There was no middle ground in Vietnam. You were either down with the wholesale slaughter of the Vietnamese people and the destruction of their land, or you were down with the movement for peace. There was no middle ground in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. You were either down with the architects and defenders of that brutal system, or you were down with Mandela and the black majority. And today, there is no middle ground in the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You are either down with Bibi Netanyahu and the butchers in Tel Aviv, or you are down with the total and absolute freedom for the Palestinian people. When an elephant is sitting on the tail of a mouse, the mouse isn't interested in hearing your nonsense about objectivity. The mouse demands that you come to its aid or stand behind someone who will. In closing, let us not forget, this has been a long and arduous struggle for the Palestinian people. A people forcibly removed from their land and homes and told they could never return. A displaced people who have suffered some of the worst crime committed in the annals of human history. I remind you of the Sabra and Shatila massacre, the work of the dead butcher Ariel Sharon, the former Minister of Defense and Prime Minister of Israel. Yet their struggle continues. And if you believe as I do in a just God, a merciful God, then we know the evil that men do cannot and will not stand the test of time. I leave you with this. Many of us come from different backgrounds and different affiliations, but we have joined forces today for a noble cause, a just cause. All too often, we confine ourselves to our own individual struggles and our own separate battles, so our victories are few and far between. Let us allow this moment, as we struggle in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters, let us allow this moment to be the moment when ordinary citizens from the various walks of life, unencumbered by mercenary motives, impervious to the mindless drivel of the corporate-owned media, bound by a righteous indignation and compelled by an insatiable appetite for justice, let us join forces today and together throw off the yoke of oppression in Palestine, America, and throughout the world. Power to the people. Free, free Palestine. Thank you.
Mongi Dhaouadi, Executive Director of Council on American Islamic Relations in Connecticut, tried to go the extra mile, meeting with some Zionist rabbis. Here's his account.
Thanks for the opportunity to use this great church to deliver a message to, first and foremost, to our brothers and sisters in Gaza, Palestine, and the occupied territories. You sit at home and you try to follow the news and watch the various channels showing image of kids being blown away, houses being demolished, entire neighborhood being flattened in a matter of an hour. And you get sad, depressed, and then you hear our politicians try to justify the unjustifiable. You get demoralized. Then on top of that, you listen to some of the religious leaders who are supposed to be our conscience, who are supposed to be the ones holding us back at moment of madness. You listen to them trying to justify this inhumanity that we see from the Israeli government. I went to an information session about a week ago at a synagogue. The presenters were 3 rabbis. So I said, there's got to be some kind of truth in there. I want to go and sit down and listen. I'm trying to look for some kind of hope so I can cling to, so I can say to my Muslim community and my imam, who is leading the prayers during the month of Ramadan every night, who is from Gaza. His family is from Gaza. His family is bleeding in Gaza. His voice is trembling as he reads and recites the Quran, and we're all standing behind him, feeling the pain that he's feeling. I said, I'm going to go and sit down at the synagogue and listen to 3 rabbis. Tell me that the madness coming from Israel and from the IDF and from Netanyahu does not reflect on all Jewish people. And certainly does not reflect on religious people. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. All I heard is how the Israelis are suffering from the anxiety when they hear the sirens. How after a long night from the Jordan River, this rabbi who just visited the area drove all the way to Tel Aviv. And then she heard the sirens, and she did not want to go to the bunkers or to the safe area. She just sat in her living room and lived through the agony of listening to the sirens. After 2 hours of this presentation by the 3 rabbis, they never mentioned about the sufferings of Palestinians. I stood up, and I was the only one who was allowed to speak against the narrative that night. I spoke to the rabbi and I said, for you as a mother, I'm not going to even address you as a rabbi, as a religious leader, as a mother. You did not hear the voices of the Palestinian women, the Palestinian mothers who lost their kids, the Palestinians who lost entire families in one shelling. How can you claim your humanity in a place of worship? I walked out disappointed. But when I come to places like this, when I hear voices like your voice, sir, when I hear you stand up for justice, sir, it gives us hope. It makes us, those who live the atrocities, and that we live it with our imams and our families, it gives us hope that one day justice will prevail. One day Palestine will be free. And one day the Palestinians will not bomb their Jewish friends in the Holy Land. One day. Thank you.
Lenny Lapin also spoke at the Hartford event, and the audience gave him a standing ovation. He explained to them that because of Israeli barbarities against Gaza, he had renounced his Israeli citizenship. He had made the same statement in Springfield, Massachusetts, in front of the Jewish Center there, at a spot near where, a few days earlier, hundreds of ignorant people demonstrated for Israel, meaning for a continuation of Israeli war crimes. We'll show you that version of Lapin's statement.
My name is Lenny Lapin, and I'm a retired teacher. I taught here in Springfield, Massachusetts for 16 years. Also, we're standing in front of the Jewish Community Center, where 20 years ago I coached children's basketball and softball teams. And today I've chosen this spot to make a public statement renouncing my Israeli citizenship. The reason I've chosen this spot is that last week there was a demonstration here which was in favor of Israel and the bombings of Gaza and everything that they're doing, that 350 people attended right here at the JCC in Springfield. And it was co-sponsored by the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts that also has their offices here. So now I'd like to make my statement. On October 19th, 2010, my plane landed in Israel, and instantaneously I was awarded Israeli citizenship with identification card number 0127-06735, solely because I am Jewish. Through reflection and study, I have come to realize that this act was a travesty of justice. There are several million Palestinians and their descendants who cannot enter and/or live and move freely in their native historical homeland. For several decades, I believed, as most Jews do, that the establishment of the Jewish state of Israel was an answer to the Nazi Holocaust and other persecutions of Jews through the centuries, such as the Russian pogroms, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Crusades. However, none of these atrocities were carried out by Palestinians, and none of them justify the atrocities and other injustices perpetrated upon the Palestinian people by the Zionist movement in the State of Israel for over a century. I am referring to the racist colonization of Palestine, the Nakba, or catastrophe of 1948, whereby the establishment of Israel as a state was accompanied by the destruction of hundreds of Palestinian Arab villages, massacres of thousands of men, women, and children, and the forced exile of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homeland. Subsequently, Israel has embarked upon an aggressive, Nazi-like expansion and a brutal, inhuman military occupation of nearly half a century. As a serious student of the Nazi Holocaust, I can only be horrified at the disgrace that the State of Israel and its Jewish supporters continue to bring upon the memory of Jewish Holocaust victims. It's a moral abomination to emulate Nazi tactics in the name of the Jewish people in their alleged security. Cowardly massive bombings and slaughter of civilian populations who have no air force to protect them. Collective punishment and torture, mass incarcerations, destructions of thousands of homes, and the vicious blockade and ghettoization of Gaza. Israel is not becoming an apartheid state, it already is one, with separate and unequal laws and policing for its Jewish citizens on the one hand, and for its non-Jewish, mostly Arab citizens and victims of the occupation on the other hand. It is with a newfound clarity of thinking and analyzing a very emotional tragedy that I have thrown off the shackles of Zionist propaganda and am proudly and publicly renouncing my Israeli citizenship, effective immediately. At the same time, I denounce the ongoing colonial oppression of the Palestinian people, a terrible injustice that is greatly facilitated by U.S. tax dollars supporting the vast Israeli military machine. I also encourage other Jews to educate themselves and to stand on the side of the oppressed. Again, I'm Lenny Lappin.
More of the speeches of our July 31st rally on our website and our YouTube channel. After the rally, we marched down to the Connecticut State Treasurer's office to protest the ownership by the state of millions in Israel bonds.
Free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
Free, free Palestine!
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 Free, free!
In response to a letter we sent them on August 1st, we received a letter back from the Treasurer's office saying the state has 16 million in various kinds of Israel bonds and 21 million in Israeli common stock. But since, quote, no federal law or policy identifies Israel as a human rights violator, unquote, the Treasurer's office sees no reason to divest from Israel. Go to our website for details and the email address of the Treasurer. We next walked to the building housing the offices of Senator Richard Blumenthal. He had that very day sent a letter to voters expressing his undying loyalty to the State of Israel, with not one word of sympathy for any Palestinian, not even a family that had been totally wiped out by the Israeli shells for which the U.S. and his Senate so gleefully supplied them. Then we went across the street. That's where the offices of Senator Chris Murphy are housed. There, some 10 young people did a die-in, lay down on the ground on private property, and risked arrest while hundreds of names of Palestinian dead were read to the crowd.
62. رايد منصور نيفة. تامر نيف جندية. 30. أحمد جندية. 50. محمد محرب جندية. 38. محران كامل جندية.
Atrocity upon atrocity pile up the bodies. Whole families are wiped out. Ambulances are shot up and the dead are left in the street. Yet the politicians dance about, trying to win the favor of the Israel lobby and the empire. Bitter. At the rally, we heard a recording of Huwaida Araf, one of the co-founders of the International Solidarity Movement. She made many fine remarks. I'll leave you with just one of her phrases. She told us, "Turn your tears to anger and your anger to action." That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.